The dawn of humanity. First steps around the fire. Introduction. A journey beyond time. Leave behind the noise of the modern world, the endless notifications on your phone, the non-stop hum of the city, and all the daily clutter that tires your mind. Take a deep breath. Let yourself drift into the flow of time, and let's start winding the clock back, not just years, but millennia. We pass the giant factories of the Industrial Revolution. We leave behind the Middle Ages, where kings and empires rose and fell. We push even further past the birth of the first cities, before the very first seeds were scattered into the soil, back to the childhood of humanity, where nature had only one ruler, the era of the hunter-gatherers. Tens of thousands of years ago, the world was much quieter, much darker, but infinitely more magical than it is today. The stars in the sky were not trapped by city lights. The night sky sparkled like diamonds scattered across a blanket of deep black velvet. In the midst of this endless darkness, a small group of humans gathered around a crackling fire at the entrance of a cave. They were our ancestors. They had no houses, no fields to harvest, and no guarantees of what tomorrow would bring. They lived by the rhythm of nature, listened to the wind, and followed the tracks of the wild. Part 1. Living by the rhythm of nature. For a hunter-gatherer, the day did not begin with an alarm clock or the stress of rushing to work. Their clock was the sun, and their calendar was the seasons. With the very first rays of dawn, they woke up alongside the world. The songs of birds, the rustle of leaves, and the distant murmur of a river were their morning news. While we modern humans view nature as a landscape to look at or a territory to conquer, they saw themselves as an inseparable part of it. When they picked a fruit from a tree, they took care not to harm the branch because they knew that the exact same tree would give them life again next year. In the early hours of the day, the group would divide into two. The gatherers, mostly made up of women and children. They lived close to the earth. They knew by heart which herb was medicinal, which mushroom was poisonous, and which roots would cure hunger. This was not light work. It required an immense knowledge of botany and sharp attention. The ancestors of hundreds of fruits and vegetables we see on supermarket shelves today were found by them in the heart of nature with their bare hands. The hunters. The men would set out to hunt. However, these hunts were not wild massacres like we see in the movies. They were games of extreme patience and intelligence. Humans were not the fastest or the strongest creatures in the wild. They didn't have sharp claws like a lion, nor could they run as fast as a deer. But humans had one massive advantage: endurance and cooperation. Our ancestors practiced what is called persistence hunting. They would walk after a prey for hours, sometimes days. They couldn't catch the animal quickly, but they tracked it, wore it down, and followed it until the animal finally collapsed from exhaustion. In this process, they had to trust each other completely and communicate with a single nod or gesture. The prey was not just meat, it was respected. They knew that every creature that lost its life allowed them to stay alive. Part 2. The evolution of fire and the first stories. As the sun slowly sank below the horizon, the sky turned from deep crimson to twilight blue. At that very moment, the safest, warmest, and most sacred time for the hunter-gatherer community began: the lighting of the fire. Fire was the ultimate turning point in human history. It didn't just protect us from wild predators. It allowed us to cook food we otherwise couldn't digest. Cooked food meant our brains grew bigger and our evolution accelerated. But perhaps the least talked about, yet most fascinating effect of fire was how it shaped our social lives. Fire turned night into day. It gave humans extra time. The small community gathered around that fire didn't just fill their stomachs. That was the place where they became a community. They told stories of how the day went. The young listened to the wisdom of the elders. They tried to understand why the wind blew, why the rain fell, and what those bright objects in the sky were. The first myths, the first stories, and the first songs were born to the crackle of that fire. A hunter passionately mimicking a deer he narrowly missed was perhaps humanity's very first theatre. Those magnificent bison paintings drawn on cave walls were not just doodles. They were the first non-digital messages left to the future. "We were here," they whispered. "We walked this earth. We fought these beasts, and we lived under this very sky.